so I could always feel Japanese men staring at me and my nuts. So awesome. This video is brought to you by all my Patreon supporters. Go Team Awesome! Alright, so before I start this video, I just want to say thank you to NordVPN for kind of sponsoring this video. Yokoso peeps, it's Oz. So today I'm going to be talking about some things that I think annoy Japanese people. I think this is the perfect time to make this video because the world is kind of slowly opening up again. As you know, the borders have been closed to Japan and a lot of people who are hoping to come this year weren't able to come. Which sucks, I know, because it was a lot of people's dreams to come visit Japan. But this video is kind of like a prep for you, so when the borders do open up and you do come to Japan, you know what you should and shouldn't be doing. Especially because Japanese people are probably going to be a lot more cautious and a little bit more uneasy around foreigners because of the whole pandemic thing. Now, before I tell you some of the things that annoy Japanese people, I just want to tell you that I've lived in Japan for over a decade. And I still don't know what's expected of me. There's a lot of said and unsaid rules in Japan and a lot of different ways of doing things. Some I agree with, some I don't. Some are similar to where I came from, Canada, and some are not. And I often get asked by friends or family or viewers of mine who are hoping to visit Japan about what they should expect and what they should try to avoid while in Japan. The good news is Japanese people are really understanding towards foreigners, especially tourists. So here are some things that Japanese people in general are kind of anal about and you should keep in mind when you're visiting Japan. So these aren't exactly set in stone. It also depends on the Japanese person. Some people are cooler than other people about things. So if you want to be on your best behavior, maybe just try to keep it in mind. Let's start with public transportation because most likely you're going to be on a train or a bus or some kind of public transportation while in Japan. Especially in Tokyo, when most people are either commuting into the city or out of the city, the trains are generally quiet. Most people are on their cell phones. They're either listening to music or watching anime or checking their mail or just sleeping. Trains in Japan are kind of like the decompress zone because Japanese people work long hours or commute long distances. It's kind of like their time to catch up on sleep or just relax and decompress and relieve stress. And you might find some random Japanese people, especially like young high school kids, that might be loud and annoying on the train, but overall I would say generally most Japanese people are pretty quiet. Actually, in general, most places in Japan in public, no matter how crowded they are pretty quiet. And I've been on plenty of trains where sometimes a group of foreigners or Japanese people are drunk or they're heading to a party. It's Friday night, Saturday night, so they're drinking and they're loud and kind of annoying on the train. I think that everyone kind of gives them like a weird look or kind of like looks down on them. So maybe hold off on the party banter and like the dick jokes until you get off the train. I don't know how priority seats work in all countries, but I'm sure most countries have priority seating. In Japan in general, priority seating is not only for disabled, but it's also for elderly, it's for pregnant women, or people who have some kind of physical or medical injury. You can tell them easily because usually there's a big giant poster that says it's priority seating in Japanese and in English, as well as the seat colors are different from the rest of the train seats. Now my thing on this is mixed. I think if the train is super crowded and there's nowhere else to sit, as long as there's nobody else that looks like they need it, I would sit down. And when someone gets on the train, if I think that they look like somebody that needs the priority seating, I'll get up and offer the seat. But a lot of people feel that you should definitely never sit there no matter how empty or how full the train is. I think that's your call. Personally, when I used to take a lot of trains, I used to carry a big heavy backpack with all my like English teaching goods, and I had like back pain and stuff, and I used to go like long distances, sometimes 3 to 6 hours of train travel a day. So I would just take the seat because I was tired, and if somebody looked like they needed it, I would offer my seat. Either way, whether you sit or you don't sit, it's up to you, but I feel like the younger and the more healthy you look, the more chances you're gonna get stares or glares from people around you. This actually goes beyond the train as well. It's not just the train, but a lot of public places. The thing about smartphones in Japan is they're used for everything mostly except for talking. Messaging, texting, listening to music, playing video games, streaming video and anime and movies, pretty much everything, even for payment, paying for the train or paying for things at a convenience store. Everything is used using your smartphone except pretty much talking on the phone. And in the train, definitely no one talks on the phone. If you do get a call on the phone, most people either ignore it or they quickly just pick up, cover their mouth and say, "I'll call you back," and turn the phone off. This is pretty much common sense and I'm sure is followed in many countries, but it sucks that there are still some people that jump lines. Luckily, I don't think this happens in Japan much because Japanese people love lining up for everything, whether it be like a restaurant or some shop or some grand opening of a show or something. And the buses and trains and subways all have a special place to stand or to line up, so it's definitely easy to tell where you should be lining up. Some countries I know have a free-for-all where like everyone just rushes the doors in and out, kind of like the pictures I've seen, especially in India. Sometimes you will notice some drunk guy or some old lady maybe push through the crowds and just head in, but overall it's not really done. And when the train does arrive, everyone waits for the people to deboard and then they board the train. So if you don't want to be a douchebag, I definitely recommend wait in line like the Japanese do. Now let's talk about things that maybe you should be careful or avoid when you're out and about. Now I think this one is a little bit blown out of proportion. Some people think in Japan that all Japanese people, when they're in public or they're outdoors, are like pure innocent angels, and then when they come back home into their privacy, that's where they get with all the hentai and the S&M tying up stuff. Outdoors, they are not as angelic as people believe. Actually, a friend of mine who came to visit Japan to visit her boyfriend thought that her boyfriend wouldn't hold her hand or touch her or kiss her or put her arm around her in public because they don't do that in Japan. I think it was just his own personal preference. And like I said, it depends on the individuals, but overall, in my decade of being in Japan, I've seen a lot of PDA, but it's not as extreme as PDA that I've seen in North America. Like you won't see couples like hardcore making out with like tongues and everything in public unless it's like the last train and it's like a drunk couple. But you will see people holding hands, people hugging. You'll probably see girls putting their head on a guy's shoulder or the guy putting their arm around a girl's waist. You'll see them holding hands, interlocking fingers, and also pecking, maybe small pecks on the cheek or even on the lips. I've even seen tons of cute senior citizen couples walking holding hands. So I think the PDA that happens in Japan is a little bit more of like a kawaii style of PDA. But at the same time, I think that Japanese people realize that they're a little bit more reserved in public and they expect foreigners to show a little bit more affection. So they're not actually surprised when foreigners have a little bit more PDA than the Japanese people would. In fact, they're expecting you to be a little bit more touchy or feely. Just don't go overboard. This is also something that's kind of case by case. Technically, eating and walking is not really a thing in Japan, except in places like festivals and like summer festivals where there's a lot of food stands and street food where people do eat and walk. You'll see Japanese people with like corn on the cob or yakitori thing, meats on skewers and like yakisoba and stuff like that, eating while they're walking during firework festivals or during traditional Japanese festivals. And like I said, technically that's the rule, but I have seen lots of Japanese in my time here who on the way to work are eating onigiri, like a rice ball or a chocolate or a protein bar or something like that, something easy that you can walk and go and eat, even like pieces of fruit. I would say if you want to be polite and you don't want to piss off Japanese people, try to not eat while you're walking. Either find a bench or a place to sit and eat something, or I guess eat something that doesn't have a strong smell or that doesn't have difficulty. For example, you don't want to walk with a cup of ramen or like sushi and eat with chopsticks while you're walking. But who walks around with a bowl of ramen, right? Now this has actually been said by a lot of I guess travel guides and blogs and stuff. I don't fully agree. Now it is true that I haven't seen too many Japanese people blow their nose. Usually they're sniffling on the train rather than getting a tissue and blowing their nose. My personal opinion is I don't think Japanese people care that much if you blow your nose, as long as you do it a little bit more quietly and a little bit more covertly. If you're in the middle of a meeting or a get-together or like a middle of the train with everyone around you and you're blowing your nose hardcore, then yeah, that might cause a lot of people to be disgusted. But if you can move into a corner somewhere or excuse yourself, go into the hallway, or if you're like outdoors somewhere, just go off to a corner and blow your nose, I'm sure there's no problem. Also, as a side note, because of this corona thing, you might want to try to suppress your cough or your sneeze as much as possible, especially if you're not wearing a mask. If you sneeze or cough in a confined space like a train, people are gonna freak out. Something cool that you might not know about Japanese taxis is the back doors are automatic. So there's a special lever that the taxis have where the driver controls the back door opening and closing. So both getting in and out of the taxi requires no hands, which is good because you want to avoid touching as many things as possible like door handles. If you're a tourist and you're carrying a lot of bags or you're shopping or something and your hands aren't free, it's easy to get in and out of the taxi as well. And the good thing about taxis in Japan is they're polite, they're friendly, they're usually like helpful if you need advice for directions or recommendations of things to do or things to see. So I really trust taxi drivers in Japan, and I think they're a lot better than taxis in other countries. But don't touch the automatic doors. Don't try to open the door on your own, whether you're going in or getting out. That kind of irks a lot of Japanese drivers. It's like kind of pressing the elevator buttons when there's an elevator operator in there with you. They're kind of protective of their gear, so back off. Now let's talk about some things that you might want to avoid when you're indoors in places around Japan. Many people already know that when you enter a Japanese or other Asian country home, you take off your shoes. But it's not just homes in Japan. Workplaces, restaurants, and a lot of places in general require shoes off. At schools and a lot of workplaces, you remove your shoes, leave them in a locker, and you wear indoor shoes. And at a lot of hotels and restaurants, you remove your shoes and you change into special slippers. And if you do end up visiting some Japanese person's house, you'll be leaving your shoes at the front entrance or the genkan. Also, beyond the shoe policy, if you're wearing indoor shoes or slippers and you go into a room that's tatami mat, you take off your indoor shoes or your slippers as well. So it's only bare feet or socks. I would say just check what everyone else is doing and just follow the lead. Also, a lot of places offer bathroom slippers, so you should make sure that you take off your slippers outside of the bathroom and use the special bathroom slippers, and double check to not leave the bathroom with those bathroom slippers like I did when I was at my gym. Oops, they didn't like that. And here's some things to keep in mind when you go to special events or outings. At a wedding, don't wear a black tie. Oops, once again, something I did. I just assumed that black tie affairs mean it's a black tie affair. So I wore a nice suit with a black tie. However, I realized that people in Japan only wear black ties, especially like the long black ties, for funerals. Any other color is okay, and most people wear white ties at weddings. Black ties are a symbol of mourning and sadness, so they should only be worn during funerals. Unless you think getting married is kind of sadness and mourning, and then in that case, I guess black is fitting. This is just out of politeness. I think a lot of people do this in other countries as well, but in Japan I think it's actually really followed. I've been to many parties and gatherings and meetings where food was served, and literally nobody touches the last piece of anything. There's tons of trays and plates with just one piece of something all laid out across the room. And in this situation, usually one person offers the food to someone else and says, oh look, the last piece of sushi, why don't you take it? So if you, not knowing and thinking that everyone is just full and are not hungry, and just go out and take the last piece of everything, you're gonna piss off a lot of Japanese people who are like eyeing that last piece. It's like a game of chess and strategy. Everyone's waiting for everyone else to offer the last piece. So you offer something to somebody else that you don't really want in hopes that they'll offer you something that you do want. Or you can do the reverse psychology way, where you offer something that you really wanted, but they'll say, no, you go ahead. And you're like, okay. And you say, I'll take this if you take this. And they're like, oh, okay, that's good. And you got exactly what you wanted. As you can see, I'm fat and I've thought about this a lot. I would say once again, don't worry about this one as well, unless you are at a really formal function like a business meeting or a wedding or some end of year party kind of thing. I think it's more important in Korean culture that you pour for each other. Generally, friends, when you go out drinking, maybe the first drink only someone will pour for you, but as the night goes on, nobody cares. You just order drinks, so you pour yourself or you just drink. So I would say don't worry about it when you're just out and about with your friends. Now let's talk about these famous chopstick rules. This is probably the only one that will really get people, Japanese people, to like cringe, because sticking chopsticks into the rice is done at funeral services. The biggest image that comes to mind for Japanese people is death. So definitely don't leave your chopsticks just sitting in the rice. Either lay them on the little holder that it comes at the table, or if there's no holder, just place them lying like on the actual bowl or on the plate. I see a lot of foreigners doing this because they think it's a good way to clean up splinters like this, but for some reason I think it makes sense, but in Japan no one does it. You won't get in trouble and no one will tell you to stop, but they'll just look at you and think you're weird. It's kind of like if you go to a restaurant and if you were to like take your fork and knife and just like scrape it like they do in those old time movies, it's kind of weird. No one does that. This is also part of like the funeral thing, and it's just as cringy to Japanese people as sticking the chopsticks in the rice. You don't want to pass from chopstick to someone else's chopstick. That's done at funerals to pass bones of the people that they just cremated. If you do want to pass something to someone, you can use your chopsticks and pass the food to someone else's plate. Or if you're in like a love couple relationship, you can just take the food and pass it right into their mouth and feed them. Couples do that a lot, and you'll see that a lot on Japanese dramas and movies where like on a date, the girl will feed her husband or her boyfriend or whatever the food directly into his mouth using her chopsticks. So yeah, you don't want to do that with some random dude or stranger because that's weird and gross. Alright, let's talk about getting naked in the onsen. So whether it's a public onsen hot spring or if it's a public bath, these are some good rules to follow because Japanese people love onsens and hot springs, and that's kind of like their love, and they don't want some like dirty gaijin ruining their experience. Sorry, but this is non-negotiable. There's only one place that I've heard of where you can wear bathing suits, and that's a hot spring amusement park called Unisan. Over there, it's like a public place where everyone wears like swimsuits. But everywhere else in Japan where there's a hot spring or a public bath, you must shower or bathe naked. And I get it, I was shy too. When I first used to go to Japanese onsens, I of course look different and I'm hairier than Japanese people, so I could always feel Japanese men staring at me and my nuts. The good thing is you can carry this little small towel that you can use to cover your junk and your privates when you're walking around, and when you get into the onsen, you can't actually wear that little small towel, or you can't put it in the water, but you can put it on top of your head. And so yeah, that's a little small useful thing to have around. Just make sure you don't dip that small towel into the water, into the onsen. A lot of Japanese people don't do that. They don't like that. And another popular mistake is some foreigners just undress in the locker room and just go straight into the hot spring and just soak in there. If a Japanese person sees that, they will freak the F out because that is, to them, the most disgusting thing that you could ever do. It's the equivalent of peeing in the pool. I think this rule is followed in all public pools where there's always signs that say, before entering the water, you must shower. And there's an area where you shower and you can either do the whole shampoo and body soap and then go into the onsen, or you can just do a quick rinse first, go to the onsen, and when you come back, then you can do the shampoo and body soap afterwards. But showering before the onsen is a must, and after the onsen is also recommended. And this might only be for like people who are in Japan for business, but you should definitely not mishandle business cards. Of course, bowing is a major thing, so you're gonna see Japanese people bowing all the time, and you should just try to, like I said, go with the flow and follow what other people do. If they're bowing, you bow as well. And if you are here for business, make sure you carry a lot of business cards, because that's a very popular thing for exchanging business cards. And maybe the rules of other countries' business cards is different from Japan, but here when you present your business card, you introduce yourself, you hold the card with 2 hands, and you bow and you offer the card. Same thing with accepting the card, you accept the card with 2 hands and you bow. Also, once you receive the card, you don't put it in your pocket, or you don't fold it, or you wouldn't write on the card anything. You would pretty much keep the card in mint condition. If you're sitting down to a meeting, you would place it on the table in front of you, and you wouldn't put it away until you are no longer with that person. If you just take the card with 1 hand, just put it in the pocket and say cool, I'm sure a lot of Japanese businessmen might not want to have business with you anymore. But like I said, you don't have to be perfect. You're going to be probably making tons of mistakes. There's a lot of other stuff you're probably not aware of either, and you're bound to maybe do something that is not done by other Japanese people. But I would say don't worry about it, as long as you're trying and you look like apologetic and you look like you're trying to be as fitting as I guess, as flexible as possible, I'm sure Japanese people will be happy and accept you. And please let me know if you do live in Japan or if you have come to Japan, what are some other things that you think Japanese people kind of get annoyed about and that we should be careful of. And also tell me about your country. Is there anything that annoys your locals when tourists do something? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to thumbs up if you like this video and share. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel because my videos are awesome. OzzyAwesome. Take care and see you next time. Peace. So obviously things are going online a lot more, so it's very important to stay safe online. Sites around the world that are blocked because it's only for that area, but if you have a VPN, it unlocks that and you can basically surf anywhere around the net and have access to all websites internationally. So having a VPN kind of gives you the extra security you need when you're like at airports or hotels or using Wi-Fi that's not at home. They have over 5,000 servers in 60 countries, so it's really super fast. They have 24/7 support and you can add up to 6 different devices to use as NordVPN. Please go to the link that I put below and enter code OzzyAwesome if you decide to get it, and you will get 70% off 3-year plan and 1 extra free month as well.